Well, good evening. And here we are at this wonderful, wonderful opportunity to spend an evening with the mayor, Quan.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
The mayor of this wonderful city that we're in, Oakland. I'm Barbara McGee, and I am with T25CL Entertainment. And T25CL Entertainment has 24-hour radio for your listening pleasure. It also has an opportunity and has given me and Sonali an opportunity to have a radio show. My show is called Straight Talk from the Hired Brush. Sonali's is called Impact. She airs Thursdays at 7:30. I air Sundays at 8:30. And also we have Rosalind's Corner. We also represent a lot of wonderful artists. So I encourage you to go to www.t25cl and you'll be able to not only see questions and answers with the mayor, but you'll be able to download MP3 music and visit and see some of our local artists. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the mayor of Oakland, California, Miss Jean Quan, who's with us.
So thank you. This is sort of a slightly different form of a house party. So if you're tuning in and watching this after it's over, welcome. And we do these around town. I've been doing them since I was mayor, not just for the re-election campaign, but just to get in touch with what's happening in the community. So we have been to most of the senior centers. We've been in apartments and homes and neighborhood associations throughout the city. So when people ask me today, how's Oakland doing? I basically say, jobs are up and crime is down, and that's not an accident, right? When I became mayor 3 years ago, you may remember that the country was at the depth of the recession. It would go on about another year. And in Oakland, because we have been what Martin Luther King sometimes describes, that part of Oakland have been these islands of poverty and these vast oceans of prosperity. We were very uneven in terms of how the recession was affecting us. Oakland was particularly affected by the financial crisis. The city lost maybe 30% of its income from property taxes, and property taxes are the main way that cities get funded. We've lost maybe 9,000 homes to foreclosures. Most of those are back into ownership and are not in the hands of the banks, but it shifted who we are as a city. And when I became mayor, I found that my previous mayor had not made many of the cuts that the council made in very tough decisions the year before. And so we were $43 million more in debt than I knew. And then the recession would probably add it big to about $58 million short on the budget. So one of the first things I had to do was to talk to the unions and talk to people in the city. And I said to them, I think that if we cut another 300 to 400 city staffers, including police, that's going to be very hard to turn the city around. And what I was very happy to see is that instead of letting another 300 or 400 people be laid off, that the unions came forward and each gave up about 9%. We closed, you remember the furlough days? We closed the city for 13 days. That's about 9% salary. And for the first time, my police union paid into their pensions. And why I mention that is because turnarounds happen for a lot of reasons, and in this city it's partly because the city workers gave, but it's also because Oakland was beginning to be discovered as the gem it is. That year, my first year as mayor, we would be named by the New York Times as the best place to visit in the world between London and Tokyo. Pretty good place, right? And beautiful. I was just hoping that the local media would pay attention and also take a fresh look, because the New York Times was. So since I've been mayor, we've lost redevelopment. We went through Occupy. We also had the lowest number of police than we'd had for a long time, and it took me a couple years to build it up. But now I have a police force that is constantly building with 1.5 academies in line. It's the most diverse police force we've ever hired. For the first time, over 50% of our police cadets are people of color. About 19% are women. That's the highest percentage of women. National average about 14%. And about half of them speak a second language, much like our city where we speak 130 languages. So when I say crime is down, it's not just because we're more diverse and we finally got the police up. We've also changed the way the police are organized and I think the attitude of the police department. We've broken up the police force into these little areas where there's a captain for each area. They have some ability to deploy officers based on what the hot spots are at that time. And they've been told, the two things that the mayor always says at graduation is, I had a year of hearings, and what everyone said from Hills and Flatlands is, get out of your car, talk to people on the corner, smile, and treat the citizens of Oakland like they're members of your family. And I say that at every graduation. We just graduated the largest class in history. And that's begun to make a change. We've also been able to put resources in the toughest neighborhoods, more police in those neighborhoods, and quite frankly, offering them choices. Federal prison or get a job, get some help, work with our churches, turn your life around. And so crime's down. Shootings, burglaries, robberies are down about a third right now. So jobs are up. So what's happening on jobs? And I'm going to talk a minute on that and then I'm going to take questions. One of the things that I found that was most difficult was that Oakland had been green-lined in parts of the city for so long. We have less retail than a city of our size should have. And we've been able to produce about 600,000 new square feet of retail. So that started with the new Target store in the Emeryville, Oakland shopping center. All along our corridors, actually there's only a 5% retail vacancy right now in downtown Oakland. And then the new Foothills Square shopping center in a part of the town where even though in the Oakland Hills, which are mostly African American, have higher income than some of my Montclair census districts, didn't have a grocery store, didn't have a bank branch, it had very few places to shop. So we worked very hard with Councilmember Larry Reed and with the national retailers, and now Foothills Square is not only open and sort of that food desert out in East Oakland, but 85% of the young people who are working there are from the city of Oakland. So I think there's a close tie between what Martin Luther King talked about, ending those islands of poverty and really providing that check that's been marked insufficient funds for a long time, because now Oakland's hot. Oakland is on the rise, and I'm very committed as mayor to make sure a huge part of the new jobs and new economy go to everybody in the city, that we don't push our current residents out as we welcome new people, because we're more affordable, we have more land for growth. We're planning to build about another 10,000, not just people downtown, but 10,000 housing units along the transportation corridors throughout the city and at the BART stations. That's a green city. Put people where public transportation is, put housing above retail throughout the city, and rebuild those neighborhoods. My favorite housing commissioner says she wants to have a coffee shop in West Oakland. I said, Barbara, we're going to get it to you because we're going to add houses to the West Oakland BART station, bring in a few more middle-class residents. We have the room. And when you get that density, then all of the coffee shops and other retail will want to be right there around that area. But cities have the ability to do that kind of planning. I'm going to answer some of your other questions that I saw ahead of time later on rent control, et cetera. And this is Oakland's time. It really is Oakland's time. You know, my husband and I travel a lot. This is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. It's one of the most diverse cities, not just because we speak 130 languages, and as my kids say, that means we have 130 kinds of restaurants. I talked to some of you about finding all of those. But because we also have a city that still has a working class and a middle class, and has enough room for new immigrants, has enough room for our young people, and that's not by accident, that's by design. And I think we have to do that. But the final thing we have to do is, wherever we live in Oakland, we have to reach out to those last islands of poverty. It's not okay, as I said in the state of the city, for 50% of African and brown men not to graduate from East Oakland schools. It is not okay that the unemployment in my zip code, Montclair 94611, is 4% for men of 18 to 25, but it is 35% in East Oakland. It's very complicated why that's so, but this is a city with a lot of heart. It's a city that's having a lot of investment now, even if I have to go to China sometimes to get it, but where there's a lot of investment in the city, and we need as a city to make sure that everybody benefits again. It's 50 years after the March on Washington. We have to complete that march, I think, in this generation when cities are being revitalized and there's economic investment back in cities. If we don't do it, it's not going to happen. And we have to put that, and I'm very proud to join with the president in my Brother's Keeper program, to put that front and center into the American understanding that it is just not okay that our young people, in particular our young men and boys of color in some neighborhoods are being left behind. We can do it. We can rise together as a city.
That's beautiful. Well said. Well said. Well, at this time, it was just wonderful, first off, may I say, Mayor Quan, to hear your passion about Oakland. Because I've been an Oakland resident for 30 years, and you're absolutely right. As Sonali said, we love Oakland. And we love to hear this update and get a clear consensus of your vision for the future. And we thank you for that. At this time, we're going to open the floor for questions. I'm here to moderate. We talked a little bit about the rules, so I'd like to take a break now, and we're going to assemble our question and answer period. Again, we're here with Mayor Quan, and she's offered so graciously to answer questions. We have our first question right now from Ken. Ken, give us your question for the mayor.
Well, first of all, good evening to both of you.
Thank you.
My question is there anything you could do about senior housing? You know, it's like, it seems like everywhere we go, they say it'll be 1/3 of your income, but by the time you pay the first and last and everything, it's like half of your income. And that's what I'm paying now. I'm paying more than half of my income for housing.
So were you a vet?
No.
Okay. And did I meet you at one of our local...
At the San Pablo where
at the San Pablo. Okay. All right. So...
Thank you.
Thank you. During the recession, there was a very little investment in housing across the country. And you can remember about 2 years ago, the president was ranting that we rescued the banks and then they were sitting on $7 trillion, that's with a T. I can't even imagine a trillion, $7 trillion that they were not investing. And a funny thing happened when I became mayor is that as soon as I became mayor, Jerry Brown decided that he was going to get rid of redevelopment. And redevelopment was the major tool that California cities were using for affordable housing, including senior housing. So what we've done in the last couple of years is we've rolled down redevelopment. We've invested a huge amount of that in affordable housing. So in the last 3 years since I've been mayor, we've built 1,700 new affordable housing units, and most of them have been senior units, partly because the developers could also get federal tax credits. The other major group of housing that we've built recently is for veterans, because the federal government, again, that is one of the areas they're investing. So a lot of the homeless men that we've taken off the streets actually have gotten housing in these new projects because the feds are paying a big part for affordable housing because Vietnam vets are becoming seniors. And so that's been a very interesting niche where we've been able to combine the vet money and the senior money. So we've built a lot. In fact, there's 2 new projects in the pipeline right now that are taking applications. So right down the street, it's not a senior housing, but it's affordable housing. That nice big lot, 3 blocks down, where they're constructing, that's going to be just under 100 new affordable housing units, probably in the best location in the city. So that was in my newsletter. If you follow my newsletter, I'm probably going to put it on Facebook pretty soon because they're probably going to get 10 applications for every unit. But we've tried very hard as a city to spread affordable housing throughout the city and not just put it in one neighborhood. We've also tried very hard to get, like in Forest City up the street, we put affordable housing right there integrated in there as well as standalone. Down at the new Brooklyn Basin project where there are going to be 3,000 new housing units. And to give you an idea of what that means to the city, in all of the 90s, we only built 900 new housing units. So in the next 4 years, we're going to build 3 times as much in just a 4 or 5 year period. So at that project, at the first phase of the project, 465 of the units will be affordable. They won't just be seniors, but there'll be some for families, et cetera. So we are in the height right now in terms of building affordable housing, partly because we're taking all that money before the state could snatch it away, and we invested a lot of it in affordable housing.
Beautiful, beautiful. And we're going to our next question. Thank you, Mayor. Hal, your
Yes.
question for the mayor.
Yeah, I'd like to know what steps you are taking to try to keep our three major sports teams in Oakland.
Okay, I'm going to need a little more than 2 minutes. I may need 2 minutes and change.
Take your time.
So I've gotten a little in trouble of answering this question lately, so I'll try not to make those mistakes again. So let me start with the Raiders. The Raiders are the easiest one. When I became mayor, the other thing was like the media said, oh, all of your teams are gone, don't even try, right? And I remember having this press conference because we were about to put money aside to do what's called an environmental impact study for the Coliseum area. Because I always knew that it seemed like a big waste of space to have that big empty parking lot most of the week and only have people parking there when we had games. And most of the cities were moving their stadiums downtown or making them more multi-development projects. So we envisioned something like LA Live, but on steroids, in the sense that there was a lot more room, but that it could be a destination because it has great transportation. The Capitol train ends there, the guy from Sacramento. The BART stops there. The airport connector will be open next year. The 880 corridor is there, and we've even talked about adding another ferry there if the development gets as dense as we think it will be. So it's an easy spot to get to. There's 160 acres on the Coliseum side, and another up to, including the private lands that can be developed, another 300 to 400 acres on the other side. So it's the largest, what we call transit-orient development space in the United States right now, with up to 600 acres that could be developed on the major transportation grid. So we put out an RFQ for a developer, and again, a lot of people didn't think we'd get a developer. I actually thought it would end up being a Chinese developer, just like the one that put $1.5 billion into the housing at Oak Tonight, or Brooklyn Basin is what we call it now. It ended up to be a group that's associated with the Middle East, and that's all I'm saying, because I'm not supposed to talk about any of the investors. So I made that mistake. I can say that the lead developer is a subgroup of Colony. Colony is 51% owned by the family of Qatar. They own the Fairmont hotels. They own real estate across the world. They are the third largest real estate group in the world, and they have a partnership with a group from Dubai, and that's all I'm going to say about the group from Dubai. So in the main part, they have a lot of money. Is the main point I'm going to say, that they are a deep-pocketed investor that doesn't need to necessarily get their profits back in 5 years like most U.S. corporations. They're looking long-term. They're looking not just at the stadiums, they're looking at retail, they're looking at hotels, they're looking at office buildings, and they have enough time, and in their framework, which both Chinese and European and Middle Eastern investors seem to have, that they're willing to make investment that will take a while, take a decade maybe to bring back, and that's the good news. So I believe that they are on track and that they will have a deal, at least for the Raiders, by the end of summer. They've done a lot of preliminary work, they're looking at a lot of stuff, but they're on track. On April 21st, they're supposed to name their building developer, and they say they're on track for that. So I want everyone to calm down who thinks that if we do the Raiders, we can't do baseball. Baseball. When I became mayor, Major League Baseball was very interested in downtown. And a year ago, Lou Wolf said that downtown was the only place he'd be willing to go. This year, he says the Coliseum's the only place to go. I'm the mayor. I actually don't care as long as they stay in Oakland. I have said that a downtown stadium, though, would probably have more economic multiplier effects for the city, because we have 200 new restaurants in Oakland and 2 million people, and growing, go to A's games. So if they stop and have a beer at the Forge and eat in my restaurants instead of just getting in their cars and going home to the suburbs, or going to Ricky's in San Leandro, if we can put a big Ricky's either down here or at the Coliseum, we want the sports fans to stay and spend a little money in Oakland while they're here. And so right now, from saying they never wanted to do anything in Oakland, Lou Wolf is suddenly saying he wants to stay here for 10 years, right? And it's sort of like, why do you want to stay in that old stadium that you say that you don't want to stay in? It's sort of like, we don't get that. But basically, my sense is he's given up on San Jose. But we're not willing to talk about lease extension, I think, both the JPA, which is a joint city-county agency, and others, until he says where he's going to build. Right, so when I became mayor, met with the representatives of Major League Baseball, and we told them I was serious that we would get them to locations. So with the Coliseum, with a developer, is clearly an option. And now the CEOs of the town have come together and have gotten from the Port Commission the rights for a year to design, develop, and negotiate something, basketball, baseball, but a stadium downtown, and obviously that would probably lead to some more hotels and more retail down in Jet London. So if you think about how the Oakland waterfront is developing with a new Coliseum City, with the new housing around Jingletown, and then Brooklyn Basin with 3,000 new condominiums and convention and sports facilities at the north part, and at the same time with the Army base, the expansion of the Port of Oakland. When I talked earlier, and I'll come back to ask me, it's one of the billion-dollar projects that's lifted Oakland's economy up so that I can start to afford to bring back city staff. But that's the A's. They have a choice. They need to make a decision soon, I think, because once the Raiders decide where they're going to go, we're going to start moving things around at the Coliseum, et cetera. But I think we're in a place, and I delivered what I said I would do: 2 viable sites with site control and possible financing. The third team, the Warriors. Now, I've always said, if I had known when I came in that the Warriors were going to try to leave right away, I probably would have spent a little bit more time up front. But most of my time as mayor, the Warriors have wanted to be in San Francisco. It is clear that they will now have to take their project to a vote because it looks like Art Agnes's project, his provision, which means anything that's over 85 feet on the San Francisco waterfront has to be passed by a vote of the people in San Francisco. It looks like that's going to win. And then they'll have to do a vote actually on that side, and it doesn't look good for them, I think, despite what they're saying. So the Warriors have asked for an extension for another year. So that means if I win a re-election, or when I win a re-election, as my husband would say, the Warriors are going to be here during the time I'm mayor. So we've been watching that. The one thing that the East Bay mayors did do collectively is we just didn't want any exemptions for anyone, the Warriors or anybody, to build on people on the waterfront around the Bay. We once almost lost the Bay. If you've ever seen the KQED special, you know, when they were literally, we're going to pay over the whole Bay and subdivide it, right? But those protections that we put on the Bay and the waterfront, including mine, are pretty important to preserving the Bay and preserving really the beautiful place we live in.
Beautiful answer. Well, we can all relax.
Or you can ask a follow-up.
My throat was here because I am a diehard Raiders fan. Thank you again. And we have a new question. And your name, sir?
My name is Ray Slayton.
Yes.
Mayor, with all of the construction coming, has the city ever thought about the inspectors that they're going to need?
You're an inspector, right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
I have. And so one of the things I'm taking to the city council is we have this 2-year budget process. It can be very slow. I actually want them to give permission to the city. Something that I did when I was a council member and I chaired the finance committee is we allowed the building department to hire as needed as long as they had the permit fees. And so I think we're going to have another one of those booms, right? So if you think about it, we've got a $1 billion project at the Army base where we're now clearing, we're going to build a new berth, we're going to extend the railroad tracks, and we'll probably put in 40 new logistics warehouses, minimally with Prologis, and now we're working on the plan for the other side of the port. So there's going to be a lot of construction there, and 50% of the construction on the Army base has to go to Oakland residents. We're right now at 52% because we're just at tearing down old buildings and grading, and there'll be more jobs coming up as we start building above ground. We have in both of the projects, so the 50% higher at the Army base and at the Brooklyn Basin project, 25% of all the apprenticeship hours have to be young Oakland residents or Oakland residents. And that's pretty important because someone said, why only 25%? And I looked at the young man and I said, did you really want to live in a building that was built by 50% brand new trainees? Don't think so. So we are really focusing on that, and Sanjay Swanson, who's my deputy mayor, formerly assembly member who led the labor committee, we're trying to now develop these school-to-career programs that link high school students with community college straight into the pre-apprenticeship program and then into the trade jobs. And we think we have enough construction going for the next 5 or 6 years where we'll have thousands of jobs that people will be able to get their union card. Because when I was young, one of my first jobs was with women in apprenticeship. And I could get women hired as electricians, et cetera. They'd be on the job for 2 years and then they didn't get rehired. So one of the agreements we have with the trades is they'll keep people working because we have so many projects. And then if we build these baseball and football stadiums, that's even more work, and that we can get people jobs. So once we get started, we're going to have the need for more building inspectors, and I have a lot of boomers retiring, so you should apply. Put your name in the list.
Very good. Great plug for yourself. Everybody, this has been just wonderful. If we want to just take one small break, we'll be right back. All right, and we're ready to get a question in your name.
My name is Jessica Harris, and I'm from San Francisco. So I drove over here just to primarily meet the wonderful Mayor of Oakland.
Oh,
Thank you.
that's wonderful.
And my question to you, Mayor, is I'm an event planner, so when I have clients coming into the Bay Area, I only have a couple of hotels to pretty much bring them into, either the Marriott or the Claremont Resort. And I was wondering, are there any future plans for any additional major hotel that's going to be built here in downtown Oakland?
Thank you, that was a ringer question, because my next series of announcements in the city will be about hotels. And you're right, I was at the Visit Oakland event just a week ago where we rolled out the new publicity that we're using. You can use it yourself to organize a local convention for your sorority or for your church, etc. We are at the point now where there's at least 5 or 6 hotels in the pipeline. So there is one closing escrow right now in Chinatown, and they're planning to build one between Franklin and Broadway. There is one being planned by a group called Strata, and they just bought parts of the city center, and it looks like they're going to buy some significant other pieces of property that you'll hear about in the next few months in Oakland. And many people are looking at the spot where the sculpture garden is across from Sears, next to the Fox Theater, and there are so many bids right now on that property, so that's the third one. We think there will be an additional one in Chinatown. There will definitely be an additional one on the waterfront near Jack London, and the question is, though, if the baseball stadium goes there, how big it will be. But we have always planned for a 4-star hotel on the waterfront that would also expand our convention facilities. In addition to that, we believe that the Colony Group will put a hotel at the airport connector. They haven't gotten that far on their plan, but when they talk about what they plan to do, they're talking about retail. Depending on what facility they build for the Raiders in particular, it would make sense to put a hotel next to the Raiders Stadium, next to the airport connector. So there's a lot of those kinds of discussions. So no, I feel it, because now, the other day someone came from Washington to give us an award, and he didn't ask for help for getting a hotel, and I think he stayed in Newark, right? Right? Because he had to be in the federal budget, and he didn't book weeks in advance. So it's getting very, very tough. So this is a tip to anybody in Oakland. You got relatives coming in, make sure they book ahead of time. If they book for the Oakland Convention Center, they can often get a discount.
Very good. Well done. And we have our next question. Thank you. Doug?
Yes.
What is your question for the mayor?
Yes, Mayor Quan, I'm concerned about global warming, also known as climate change or
Yeah.
climate disruption. And we all know it's caused by man-made sources of burning carbon fuels and coal and increasing carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Now, San Francisco claims they're the greenest city in the United States. I'd like to know what the city of Oakland is doing to raise our stature as a green city, what kind of initiatives we have as far as putting solar on rooftops and greening our city to make it a more sustainable city. Thank you.
Well, Oakland and San Francisco have a pretty friendly rivalry. Sometimes they beat us just because they're more dense, right? And so, because one of the things that measures on greenhouse gas is how many people don't have cars, right? And they're more dense than we are. But actually, on two of the measures last year, we were ahead of San Francisco, right? We were named as the greenest city on one measure, and we were named as the second greenest city on the other measure, and San Francisco was not ahead of us. But it all depends on what people count. Right, and so they usually beat us on the percentage of the workforce that rides their bicycles. But after I get my bike share program, which we just passed through MTC, we're going to have 450 bikes here in Oakland that are bike share bikes that people can ride, just like in the city, and 300 at Berkeley, and then we're going to give some to Emeryville. But we're going to create this big triangle. And I've been asking and demanding money because they've had the money for a long time, and we're like contiguous and flat. You know, when you think about, you know, you could ride all the way to Richmond if we align the bike corridors well. So Oakland, Berkeley, San Francisco, Seattle, we're always in competition for being the greenest city. So they got better PR and more money for PR, but we're actually pretty proud. So these are some of the things that we've done. If you go to the city website, we have a climate action plan. And we're trying to get our greenhouse gases way down. And these are some of the things we've already done, and these are the things we still need to do. So for instance, Oakland and San Francisco were the first cities to compost our garbage. And we compost them in very smart digesters and in places where we recapture the methane gases. So that's a big part of our contract coming on garbage. So I hate to warn people, garbage bills are going to go, partly because we haven't had an increase in 10 years, but partly because we're also demanding green technology so that we don't add to global warming. And so I was on the council, and I actually passed the resolution to make sure that we compost all of our food waste and all of our green waste. And that's really, right now, we're to the point where we divert from the landfill between recycling and composting about almost 70% of all of our waste, right? So we're way ahead of the national average, which is about 30% in the Bay Area. And then people start to fall. So I also happen to write the legislation on plastic bags and on styrofoam. Styrofoam, polystyrene is the legal name, is not only dangerous because of some of the chemicals if you heat them up and mixing with your food, but they last 1,000 years, those little white bubbly things. And with the whole Pacific Ocean has this huge mass of plastic broken up in the ocean that's probably killing a lot of our sea life. So that's why we banned plastic. We made all of our fast food containers compostable, right? And it costs a little bit more, but after Oakland did it, the cost of those little Big Cell Betty told me that the little plastic clamshell now is the same price as the plastic one. So the more people go green, the cheaper those will be. The other thing is that we put in the green line, and we have been trying to fight for more public transportation so people will go out, get out of their cars. A lot of young people moving to San Francisco tell me they're never going to have a car. That, you know, when they need a car, they use one of the car share companies, or they ride their bikes. And we just change the rules so you can take your bike onto BART. And we're working to make it greener in terms of people not having to have cars. And so that's why the bike share is really important. And for the rest of us who have cars, we can reach our goals if we each take one less car trip a week. And when you think about it, that's pretty easy. It might mean don't go out, you know, do all your chores in one day instead of going out every day for a little trip if you're staying more at home. Or commute with somebody once a week, or that on that Sunday, ride your bike to the farmer's market instead of taking your car. There's lots of ways, and that's just a way to quantify it. And if we do that, our greenhouse gas plan is one of the most ambitious in the country. I think we even beat San Francisco, but I'll have to check on that.
Great answer.
Wonderful answer. Wonderful answer. Absolutely. Now we have a question, and your name is Pamela?
I'm Pamela. Yes,
Wonderful.
Thank you, Barbara. Good evening, Mayor. First of all, I want to say that I'm very happy to live and work in Oakland. And speaking of green, I can walk right across the street and catch the green bus to go right to work. And I have the option of also walking to work, so I really appreciate that. So, Mayor, I know that you support the Boys and Girls Club of Oakland, and I appreciate that. But we're coming up on the time of year where a lot of students will be out of school, a lot of high school students will be out of school. And I'm wondering, what are your plans for summer jobs for youth?
Now, was that a ringer question? So,
Thank you, Pamela.
when I became mayor, a lot of things happened. I could not believe it. In April, my first year as mayor, the Republicans cut the mayor's summer job program. And I only had 2 months till June. And this is sort of like, what more can happen? Well, I didn't know about Occupy and redevelopment, but when that happened, I was a little panicked. Luckily, I had planned to try to double the number of jobs, and we were able to get up to about 600. But historically, for 20, 30 years, we've been getting about enough money to give 500 summer jobs to kids. And so we just were barely able to save the program the first year. The second year, what I was worried about is not enough kids from East Oakland or West Oakland were applying. So we actually took the job application process out into the neighborhoods. We actually did it in some parks that I had adopted. We did it at all the high schools in the entire city. And the applications were 2,000, right? And we tried very hard, but we got to 1,100. So sometimes having higher goals, and you may not make it, but you get a lot farther than when you think you're going to get. So we got to about 1,100, just over 1,000 jobs year 2. Last year, we got to 1,600, just barely a few short of 1,600. And my goal this year is to get to the 2,000. If 2,000 kids need jobs, I'd like to get to 2,000. What we've done is we've taken those jobs and really tried to fill them in the toughest neighborhoods. So people complain that, oh, she does everything just for a certain neighborhood. No, I do it when the employment is high. And so you know that I just earlier said that the unemployment in East Oakland is 35%, right? So what we've done is try to now this year link the jobs more with ongoing internships and growing our own. So the one that I'm most proud of, they're doing 2 new innovative ones this summer. One is, even though I've gotten a more diverse police force, only 10% of my applicants are from Oakland. So we are hooking up with 2 high schools, and every student who's a junior or senior in those 2 high schools are being offered the opportunity to be an explorer with the Oakland Police Department. So I don't know how many I'm going to get. They're not as popular as the fire department. I can always fill the 25 for the fire department, but I never seem to be able to fill the ones for the police department, where we're going to try really hard. I talk about it a lot. I'm adamant to get 25 kids who just don't want jobs. And like sometimes I found in the fire department, there were a lot of women who actually didn't want to be firefighters, but actually when they did the internships, they actually realized, oh, there are other things I could do in the fire department other than climbing buildings with 50-pound hoses on my back, right? And so it's been very interesting, but I'm adamant this year to get at least 25 young people who want to be police officers. And what we're saying to them is that we'll give you an internship year-round to stay and work with us as explorers. And if you go to the Merritt College Law and Justice program, you'll have a chance to become a cadet, which is a part-time job while you're taking the law and justice classes, and we'll let you do that until you take the test to become a police officer. So I'm really trying to grow my own because I don't have enough Afro-American candidates, I don't have enough Oakland candidates, and so we're going to try to change that. The other program that I'm doing that is new and unique is because we don't seem to get people to feel like they can cross that line to go over to the Army base. We're going to try to do a big sort of pre-apprenticeship program at Laney College where the Oakland building trades are going to give kids sort of like a rainbow spectrum of what the different jobs in construction are, because you could drive a huge machine, or you could be a laborer and build very good and needed ditches, or you could be an electrician. There are so many different jobs, and they're very well paying jobs, and they are very forgiving of what the president calls youthful indiscretions, as long as you're test drug free. And so those are really important, because literally they're going to be 2,000 to 4,000 construction jobs in the city. If I could take 2,000 or 4,000 kids off the streets of Oakland, I'm not going to need so many police, right? At the same time, we're asking the entire city to look at how to change how we use summer interns. Don't just use them to come in and answer your phone and staple papers. Think of it as successor training. And so last year, my most successful department, the one I'm going to give a prize department, has the most kids who want to come back and work for the city. The one that won last year, when I had sort of a little lunch for all of our interns and asked them what did they learn, and then I asked them how many wanted to come back and work for the city, and only 5 raised their hand. And I'm like, okay, why is that? And then 4 of the 5 was from the finance department. And I'm like, so like, that's not my most sexy department, right? Right? And what they said, what I found out is that department took the kids to the stock exchange, showed them where they sold and bought bonds, took them to the mint, and really showed them about economics and what the different jobs were. So I have this challenge now for all my department heads, and one of the most interesting is the library. For the first time in many years, we're going to take high school interns again, and we're going to hire them year-round. And so we're trying to do that with every department to look, because I've got a workforce that's probably at least 40–50% boomers, and they all, if they can afford it, could retire in the next 4 to 5 years. And so I want Oakland kids to take back that job. We're doing the same thing in healthcare with the hospitals, et cetera. So I'm a former school board member. The School to Career Academies were at the height when I was president of the school board. I want to help them rebuild those. I want to make a smooth transition so that Oakland kids can get the jobs in this really booming city right now. We're booming in healthcare facilities. We're booming in construction. We're booming in transportation. I'm hoping we'll continue to boom in hotel, entertainment, and the arts. So we want those jobs to go to Oaklanders, and the summer job program can be the bridge.
That was a beautiful answer. Absolutely, and we're all in support for that. We all are in support for that. I want to know, how many more questions do we have? Okay, so that we have 3?
3 more, okay.
3? We have 4? Okay, we're going to have to keep
Okay,
it.
I'll try to keep the questions short.
Mine is short.
Yeah, okay. Fred.
Hello,
what is your
Barbara,
question?
and good evening,
Hello,
Madam
sir.
Mayor. My question is that what I see the MacArthur BART Transit Village is coming online. My question is, what is going on in West Oakland to that transit village that burned down?
Okay, all right. So,
Thank you.
West Oakland is, the historic heart of the city. It's where all the immigrants originally lived. When I was a college student at Berkeley, I was part of the Student West Oakland project. I actually ran tutorials down at many of the schools like Cole, et cetera. And so when I was a student, I used to help the neighbors print out these leaflets because redevelopment just flattened West Oakland. And a lot of people started moving to East Oakland, but many of them actually didn't have a choice after a while because they were just tearing down all the Victorians, et cetera. So I felt very sad when I came back to Oakland and saw that it was still flattened, they hadn't rebuilt it. And it's just like it tore apart a very strong African-American community. It used to have middle-class doctors and insurance people, et cetera, barbers, et cetera. So it is now a time during the recession that we took certain neighborhoods that needed to be built up, and we did these area-specific plans so that now that the investors are coming in, we can move quickly. So we did a lot of environmental impact studies, et cetera. So I believe that there are at least 2 developers who now want to develop housing, more middle-income housing around the West Oakland BART, because we have a lot of low-income housing there. So, my housing commissioner can have her coffee shop. She needs a few more middle-class neighbors. And so they are talking about a developer for at least 2 different spaces there. So I believe that, and we've been able actually to find some Chinese developers who are willing to invest in building them, in at least one of them. So I actually think it's going to go ahead. But there's still negotiations over which developer gets which site. And then once they develop their plan, we've been trying to match them up with people who now want to invest in housing. Housing in Oakland is considered a very good investment now by certain people, including the Chinese, because they like project-ready projects where they're going to get a steady income back. And so I'm very hopeful that the West Oakland housing will happen.
All right, and our next question, your name, sir?
Norman.
Norman.
Yeah, my name is Norman Brown. I'm with Peacemakers, and we work in the schools, both grammar schools and high schools. My concern is also about youth programs. I was the manager of the citywide youth programs in the city of San Francisco for 18 years. One of the things that I'm concerned about is getting local businesses to sponsor a young person. They don't have to hire that person to work in their facility. What we do is we cost it out. We say, okay, so it costs, let's say $3,600 for a summer for a young person.
That's more expensive than us.
Well, that's just a figure, and it's probably too low. But the idea is to get all of the businesses and individuals, if they care to pay for a summer of work for a young person. And once we do that, I'll show you how to place all of them. I figure we can do maybe 4,000 or 5,000. Let's go for it.
Well, so what we've been doing is we do it for our Workforce Investment Board, which is a board of private businesses and city staff and a couple of nonprofits. So we're having a breakfast. So any business in town who would take an intern or would sponsor an intern, we're having a breakfast at the end of this month on April 31st. So just call my office, RSVP if you have a business, if you're willing to take a kid. I'm actually only asking for $1,500 for the summer. And because we're working closely with the school district and their internship programs to do some of the other training that I'm not paying for, but the school district is for their academies. And then I've already mentioned these other programs. So far, I've only been able, and I have done that. I've had these breakfasts. I've gone to the chamber. I call people up and break their arms. And it's actually been the public agencies that have stepped forward. So I'll give you an example. The Oakland Housing Authority offered 300 jobs to kids who live in the Housing Authority. And that was one of the big jumps that I got last year, and they're going to do it again. We've gotten foster care because foster kids now, thanks to the work of Sanjay Swanson and others like me on the school boards for many years, we're able to get foster care kids support until they're 22 if they go to school. It used to be a lot of kids would be homeless at 18, and a lot of the girls working in International Avenue were people went into the foster care and offered them places to live, and the next thing they knew they were working international. And so it's been very important. I've worked on places like Oakland Oaks and First Place so that we can get foster care kids places to live, but also using this time while they're in high school to make sure that they have summer jobs. So the county has come up and offered summer jobs to almost all of its junior and high school foster care kids. So that's been a big part. Private industry has come up somewhat too with the presidents, and we're going to make it a national campaign for those of us who are working in My Brother's Keeper to try to get the companies to step forward. But what I find is the problem is that in San Francisco, where they have a lot of the corporate headquarters, that United Way and the city keeps the money in the city. So I've been having very heart-to-heart talks with corporate companies that are headquartered in San Francisco say, the really poor kids in the Bay Area live in East Palo Alto, Richmond, and Oakland. And you need to make sure that when you give your money for summer jobs, that you give it to the region and particularly give it to those cities that have the highest percentage of low-income kids. 1/3 of the kids in Oakland live below the poverty line. And so that's absolutely critical. And so that we are exactly doing that, probably not in your San Francisco model. We're doing it for a lot cheaper budget, but we are doing that.
Very good, very good. And again, you're watching T25CL, and we're presenting Mayor Quan, an evening with Mayor Quan here. Our two questions we have. So we're going to now go. Please tell us your name. You catered this wonderful event.
Yes, I did.
And we thank you so much. Tell us a little bit about your business. Wasn't the food wonderful? Did we love it?
Thank you.
I'm hoping I can still get a plate over there.
I put my plate aside ahead.
Oh, did you? Oh, good. Well, I'll be eating with the bear.
That was the right thing to do. Hi, my name is Sherry Crenshaw. And first, I want to say it was an honor to meet you, Mayor Quan.
Thank you.
I wanted to talk about, there's a big population of homeless people in the world. And I want to know, what can you do about the homeless population in the city of Oakland?
Okay. So, good question.
Beautiful.
So we've had a East Bay Corridor project where we're working together with the county and other cities because the homeless will drift across our boundaries. And when I was a school board member, and particularly we had these pretty silly policies where homeless families could only stay in a shelter for maybe 3 months. Not enough time to stabilize. So we've changed a lot of those policies, and we pretty much in Oakland, there are no families with kids on the streets of Oakland right now because we've developed transitional housing for families and several facilities facilities that just take families, and we try not to break up the families. Because the thing I found the most serious when I was a school board member, and I led a lot of the work around this, was that if your kid was over 13, they'd separate them off, right? In this city, you can't send a 13-year-old boy somewhere else, right? So that's why I built a lot of family transitional housing for the homeless, and working together with the housing authority. We've been one of the cities that's given them Section 8 vouchers rather than putting up in hotels or temporary shelters as quickly as we can. Once they're stabilized, once they prove, that they can, that they can actually function, because people are homeless for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes parents have to be taken to mental health facilities where they can get that help while at the same time where we're trying to keep the kids from being homeless and keep the family together. So it's very complicated. Most of the homeless left on the streets of Oakland now, and the number of almost no families in our census, and I go out to every census, right, on the night when we count the homeless, go under the bridges, go to different places. Most of our veterans are off the streets now, too, thanks to the Obama administration. And so if you've been to the new Gateway, it's a very interesting combination of Vietnam vets and little old Chinese ladies. It's right there on the edge of Chinatown, right? And it's a very, very interesting little culture there, and they fight over the gardens and whatever. But that's 50% vets. And many of the people who used to sleep in City Hall, I was really worried that the Occupy people had scared them away. And then when I went there, they were like, Mayor Quan, we're so lucky we got into this place, right? And I was so happy to see them, because a lot of them had been Vietnam vets, had been on the streets for a long time. And so the ones who are remaining tend to be men with drug or alcohol or mental health issues, and new people who are coming from other counties that don't have homeless programs. So I'm at City Team all the time. They come and walk with us on the Peace in the Parks program or on Friday nights. They're almost all from North County. They're almost all white. They're almost all Iraq veterans. So the very young people, and they're mostly staying at City Team, right? And City Team's been trying to get them jobs and moving. And so in the wintertime, when we can stabilize some people, either get them back on their meds or get them off drugs or drinking, we're often able to transition people to single-room housing. And if they stay for their job training, they can transition into a job. But the remaining population is pretty tough. But we're trying not, and I know it annoys the people in the community if you've got a homeless population, we try to take one at a time and really process them all and try to get them off the streets permanently, rather than just putting their stuff in a dumpster and then they just reappear somewhere else later. So it takes us longer now to get to the encampments, but we spend a lot more time with the people at the encampment to try to get them permanently off the streets.
Thank you, Mayor Quan.
Hello, Mayor Quan.
This is going to be our last question, and I really want to thank the mayor, number one, for her candor and for her honesty and for her passion and her energy in our city. And I really think we need to take the time out to thank her and let her know how much we appreciate this intimate update. So we're going to go to our last question.
My name is Kevin Martin. Speaking of the veterans that you were just talking about, I work for the VA over in Palo Alto, and my job is to go into the bushes and find those veterans, bring them out, get them housed, talk landlords into housing them, make sure that they get some type of income going. We try to get them back into schools, into jobs, and we just walk hand in hand with them until they reintegrate back into society. I myself am a part of Impact Incorporated, and we are a startup program that houses veterans. We have a lot of veterans at the VA Palo Alto healthcare system that are from the Oakland area. And once they've been through whatever programs, they want to come back here. And my question to you is, are there any employment projects, or do you foresee any projects that will give veterans a special preference to give them a hand up, not a handout?
Well, it depends on the age and the physical. So the groups that have been the most successful, and this is what I tell the governor all the time, because particularly a lot of the people who become homeless, particularly as they started, I think Oakland's taken 5,000 prisoners from the state system, that particularly a lot of the more elderly ones that are not quite in as young and physical shape, that they're having a really hard time finding jobs. The only crime that is up right now is car break-ins, so I have a theory about that. All the other crimes are down about a third. Shootings are down a third, home break-ins are down a third, robberies on the street are down a third, but don't leave anything in your car. So what we've been looking at, as I said, to look at the transitional housing, particularly as we've redone the California Hotel, the San Pablo Hotel, et cetera, and a lot of our vets are ending up there. I'm hoping that the Obama money continues, and that as we build these new projects, I want 25% of them to be affordable, that we can continue to build them as part of other affordable housing projects. So I would just say talk to Susan Shelton and talk to my housing people to make that nexus, because I have a one-stop housing office at 250 Franco Gowa, and so whatever your problem is, whether it's mortgage, the banks, or being homeless, they have a one-stop there. And then Susan Shelton is our wonderful homeless coordinator. She's been part of the county overall plan, and she can tell you what's coming up right now. But there's actually a lot of affordable housing projects that were being built during my first 3 years that are coming up, and they're beginning to take names. So Bridge Housing down the street, and the housing center, the Catholic Cathedral Housing Project, actually sort of downtown. I think a lot of seniors will be in there. It'd be perfect for the vets who are seniors.
Okay, thank you so much.
I thank you so much for your questions. And now, everyone, we're going to hear from the CEO of T25CL. He's going to give us some remarks, and then we're going to go to Mr. Quan, the mayor's husband, to find out how you can get involved with Oakland and with the re-election of our mayor.
No, I just have an exit question.
Really?
One more question, go ahead.
It's a very biased question. As a filmmaker and an owner of a multimedia company, here in Oakland, we need a state-of-the-art community access channel. We have a lot of artists here. Filmmakers here, we have directors here, we have producers here. We have to go to Berkeley to do it. I was in Long Beach last week. They're welcoming us to come down there. I want to do it here in Oakland. And we have a lot of great talent here. We need a channel, and we need to showcase the talent right here in Oakland. So can you pass this next week in council meeting and appropriate the funds right away?
Well, let me tell you a little bit about the history. This is Brown Act, and Oakland is stronger than the Brown Act, so it'd have to be passed in 3 weeks. But the bottom line is that Oakland's made, as AT&T and Comcast have given cities less and less money for public access stations. And in a city like Oakland, we pretty much have an old lawsuit that gave us a set amount of money. We made a very tough decision 10 years ago, and of course I was biased because I was on the school board and had come to the city council, to give half of the money to the school district. So where other cities might use it to have an extra just at-large station, we actually gave it to the school district. And the school district has a nicer station than we do. As a state-of-the-art, and that's a station. And Sherry Hu, who's the former newscaster from Channel 5, is sort of their guardian angel. So we do let people use our facilities, but my understanding is my staff's been very entrepreneurial, and they charge people, and that the school district also has some time too. And that's a choice. I mean, I'm willing to enter in the conversation. The problem is that really we have this set amount of money. It's pretty much split down the half. Half goes to the city, half to go to school. Many cities just took all the money for themselves. But as a former school board member, I made sure that the schools continued to get the money, because many of the people who work in stations throughout the Bay Area now came for that program, either for the Fremont Media Academy or for the school district new station. And a lot of professionals are coming back, like Sherry, to help them. So if you saw the Marshawn Lynch, really good Oakland school kid at attending school.
Yes.
That was great, right?
Oh, yeah.
The kids produced that with the help of professionals from the field, right? And that's the kind of thing they can produce. So I'd be happy to have an offline discussion with you, but it is really an issue of how we divided the money.
All right. All right, wonderful. All right, So, everyone, we're going to bring the man behind the woman.
Dr. Hewitt.
Yeah.
So this is my beloved husband, Dr. Floyd Hewen. He wants me to say 43 years. I was trying to keep our age a little bit more vague. But we met as students at Berkeley, and we worked on Chinatown projects and later became co-founders of the ethnic studies movement on campus. I got suspended, he didn't, I don't know. But we have been involved in community organizing in Oakland most of our lives. We spent a little time in New York when he was going to medical school. But he's really been my partner and my best friend and a really frantic campaigner. So he wants to say a few words about the campaign.
Absolutely.
Most of you probably have never been involved in a campaign, and it's really pretty simple. It comes down to people. I want to recognize a few people in the audience today. One is Will Stevens right there, is one of our inveterate campaigners. Kathy Dwyer right here is one of our main volunteers. Her son was helping, and Christy McCarthy helps. The hours of effort they put into making this thing go. 4 years ago when we ran, we were up against the best organized, best funded opponent in the history of Oakland. And we ran a grassroots campaign that nobody has ever seen like it until now. And we won. We won by 2,000 votes. It was close. 2,000 votes is nothing, it's a pretty close race. But we did win. And it was all about one-to-one effort. It's talking to people. This time around, as you heard from my wife, the amount of stuff she's done for the city of Oakland, this should be a no-brainer. It should be a no-brainer. The reason it's not is that we have a media that has not been reporting on the truth. For example, all that stuff that you talked about earlier about public image and what do people know, the New York Times recognizing us, but not the Chronicle. Even if a third of the work had been getting out on a regular basis, there wouldn't be so many people running for the same position. So, my appeal to you is to help us get the truth out. That's all. That's all we want. What's in those booklets is the truth. That's all you can say. And once the truth gets out to the majority of the people of Oakland, we're going to win re-election. Now, there's a special effort thing that I'm going to ask you. Those of you who live in this building, as you know, it's not so easy for me to go up to a locked door and knock on the door. It's easier to go to a single dwelling home. So anybody who would like to help us get the truth out around this mayor in this building, that's 600 people that live here. That's a lot of votes. So it's all about one-to-one. We use the Obama method. It's 1 to 25. The first time we did that, we had 1,000 volunteers. Each of them talked to 25 people. We got 25,000 first-place votes. It's really pretty simple. It's just simple, after you've done it. So that's what this is all about. It's about getting out the truth, and it's about getting the word out. There's only 6 more months to voting starting in October. I know for those of you who aren't involved in the campaign, that seems, well, I didn't know that. Well, of course, we know that. So I'm making an appeal to you to get involved. We have sign-up sheets here, and I even have volunteer trainings. Well, has volunteer training been interesting and invigorating for you?
Exciting, lots of exercise.
Right. See, he's keeping his weight down just like me. I've already lost 9 pounds. And I walk every weekend, Saturday and Sunday, and that's not something I do normally. So it's definitely a great thing to do. So also, if you'd like to donate to the campaign, we have envelopes here, and that's sitting right there on that. So thank you so much for doing this, Sonali especially, and Ms.
Let me just add one thing. Let me add one thing. I haven't been campaigning much because I've been busy running the city. And I know in the next few months I'm going to have to change more to a campaign mode and take a little bit more time. But I really am trying to finish these major projects, the sports teams, et cetera, before we get into the hard heat of summer. But I want to say that a lot of people didn't expect me to win. It's been much tougher being the first woman mayor because you're always second guess, and that's just part of being a woman mayor in America. There's only about 10 of us in the top 100 cities, and there aren't that many of us. But it is also, I think, that sometimes people just don't want to acknowledge Oakland, and so I don't take it all personally. But I do know, and that I thought we had a good chance to win. I wouldn't have given up my council seat. I wouldn't have taken a second mortgage on my house. My opponent had $2 million to spend. We were never going to have that money. But I really believed in the people in the city. And I believed that we could get 1,000 volunteers who would then turn around and contact 25 other voters. And that would mean either contacting people on your floor, coming down to the phone banks. A couple of you were Obama phone bankers. I remember calling into Ohio on the night before the election. And so some of you are really good and professional phone bankers and helped us go through Nevada, Colorado, and Ohio, and I think we did Seattle too, out of Oakland. So there are a lot of very experienced people who came out of the Obama campaign who helped me when I ran for mayor. And it is really about grassroots. And in some cases it is about the media bias, so for instance, people don't know that the Oakland Tribune will not let me print anything now under my name and has not for a year, right? But when they're blasting, a white guy who lives in the suburbs of Walnut Creek is blasting me on the budget and they won't let me respond, right? And that's not fair, but that's just my life, right? But the city in general, you can't deny that we've had $3 billion projects underway. Now, actually, the third one's still a secret, but you'll hear about it in the next few months. I have to remember what's public and what's not public. We have all 3 of our sports teams in play. We had a budget that was almost $50 million in deficit, and we now have, we've always kept a full reserve for that, and we brought in about $18 million more in revenues than we expected this year. Now, of course, the council overspent by 10, so I only actually have 8, but I'm actually expecting with these new property sales, I'll have 10 for next year, and that will bring in yet one more police academy. Everything for the city seems to be going in the right direction. And crime, it's not just like people are quibbling over the murder figures. I mean, they're basically tracking last year. April was a bad month. I bet you we go beyond last year. But remember, guys, that murders went down 30, almost 40%. Yeah. That is the trend. And I see those kids every morning. I think about what it's like to have 2 classrooms at Castlemont, because kids cut school a lot. There's probably only 20 kids in each class. 2 noisy classrooms of young guys who are there learning and living that might not have been there if the trend had continued. So the trends are important, and the trends that people are investing in the city, that we attracted the biggest investment from a private investment in China. It means something. It means that people around the world see Oakland differently. They really believe in it because they're putting their dollars, or I guess it would be their yuan, into our economy. And people are moving over to the city, from the city to our city. And someone said, are you trying to compete with San Francisco? I said, no, Oakland is Oakland. We're not trying to be San Francisco. We think we've done some things better, and we have better climate anyhow, and better food. So we are trying to be Oakland, and we have this opportunity to really deliver on Martin Luther King's speech. I think about the quote, it's the part that's never talked about. They always talk about going to the mountain, whatever. But he said at the end of that speech is, I don't believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. I believe that that our children will see the promised land, but they'll also see that check, right? It's the economic prosperity that we can provide in the city, and Oakland can really be a model for the country. There's a reason why we're part of My Brother's Keeper, because this is a city that's trying very, very hard to turn around those decades of cycles of unemployment, poverty, school dropouts, and violence. And I truly believe the city can do it. We have enough talent. We have an army of boomers coming along the way who are highly educated and are going to have a little extra time. So I nag almost all of my friends to take one of those kids, particularly the tough kids. So if you were tough enough to be a PTA president, I just told a friend of mine recently, you're tough enough to take a foster kid, right? And the foster kids, there's like 80 of them now waiting for mentors. And so this is the last thing I did. If you can't volunteer on the campaign, you decide to support another candidate, that's okay. But you can mentor in a school, either helping a 3rd grader read by 3rd grade, or taking one of those tough kids or waiting for an advocate in foster care. We had 200 at the beginning of the school year. We're down to 80 kids who are wanting an adult to work with them. And so that's really what one of my goals this year is by the end of the year, before summer starts, that every foster care kid who wants an advocate and wants an adult to work with them will have somebody to work with them. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Well, everyone, we have just been fulfilled. As citizens of the city, we have had an opportunity to sit intimately with the mayor and to understand what is the projection for the future, her vision. We've had an opportunity to see and hear the complexities of what it takes to run a city, and I am very impressed, and I'm so thankful that you took this time out of your busy schedule to be with us here. And I'm so thanking Sonali for having the vision and the opportunity to bring us together. And the gentleman that's making all of this possible is standing here right now, Mr. Andre Ward, who is CEO of T25CL. And I'd like him to give the final remarks, and then we're going to let you give contact information for people for our viewing audience.
Photo opportunities.
Sure.
First of all, I want to thank all the citizens that are here tonight, too, from the city of Oakland. I think that they deserve a round of applause.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
And a lot of people here I haven't seen in a long time, like Norman and Fred, and haven't seen those guys in a long time. And my arch nemesis from the radio station is here tonight, too. We'll see you this week as well. And so, but no, this has been great. Also want to thank Sonali for being a great hostess.
Beautiful. Absolutely.
And for letting T25CL Entertainment come in here this evening to shoot this event. Also want to thank Mayor Quan and Mr. Quan.
Dr. Hume.
Dr. Hume. Okay. And Barbara, you've been a great hostess for this evening. And as soon as this goes through post-production, this will be up on our website at www.t25cl.com. Okay, and you guys can see it, and it'll be there for viewing for everybody all over the world. And so we want to thank you, and we'll see you at the next one, maybe.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
So for contacting the campaign, it's our website, GeneQuanForOakland.org, Oakland.org.
People can contact me through my Facebook, Oakland Mayor Jean Quan.
And that's right, it's a newsletter. It is fascinating, wonderful information.
If you gave us your email, you will get the newsletter.
Wonderful.
And you can take yourself off if you like.
And what a great opportunity to take a picture with the mayor.
And for everyone, thank you.
Happy Tuesday, guys.